Good evening. Welcome to the RSU5 Board of Directors meeting. It is Wednesday, November 8th, 2023. We are at the Freeport High School back in the library. Couple of housekeeping things. Kara is not with us this evening, but we have some new folks here at the table. So our other, because I believe Phoebe was here at the last meeting, our other student rep, Lily West, is our other student representative, and this is her first meeting. Welcome, Lily. We also have two new Freeport representatives on the board after the election yesterday. So we have Cheyenne Farrell and Carolyn Jensen. So welcome to you two as well. And we will get started with the Pledge of Allegiance. Do I have a motion for consideration and approval of the minutes from the October 25th, 2023 meeting as presented, barring any errors or omissions? Thank you, Danielle and Candy. All those in favor? Great. Opposed? No. Adjustments to the agenda.
I have a couple this evening. If we look at item number 8, reports from the superintendent, I suggest we call that first one instead of number 1 letter A, and the next one B will be. I have 2 resignations to announce. Also, 14 personnel. I would like to add consideration and approval to employ a PE teacher at Durham for the remainder of the school year for a 1-year only position, and that is all.
Okay, so we will move on to good news and recognition, and we will pass it over to Lily to give us an update on how it's going.
Awesome. Can you all hear me all right?
Yeah, you got it. Yeah.
Okay. I'll keep it short and sweet tonight. As you guys probably know, fall sports have been wrapping up. We had 2 incredible wins with cross country, and field hockey, both winning states, which is pretty impressive. Winter sports have just begun. Girls ice hockey will have their first games just around Thanksgiving, and other winter sports should be starting pretty soon after that. Also, the musical The Addams Family will be showing this Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, so I would definitely recommend coming to see that. People have been working very hard on it, so I'm quite excited. There was also a student walkout that I organized with a couple of my friends this past Friday, and we walked to Town Hall to support the victims of the Lewiston shooting. I thought that was something worthy of mentioning. And at that, we had about 70 students who came out to support from all different grade levels. Yeah, so that's my report.
Thank you, Lily. All right, so we will move on to public comment. If we have anyone who'd like to speak, we do not. It's been a hot minute since that's been the case. So we will move on to item 8, report from the superintendent.
Okay, a couple of things for our items for information. This is certainly our first board meeting since the tragedy in Lewiston, and I think certainly we would like to start with condolences to the families of those who lost lives in Lewiston, and also many of our RSU5 staff members and family have been touched by these events in so many ways, and will continue to come together and support one another. Another item I have, per our policy DJ, which is bidding and purchasing requirements, our service contract with mechanical services for HVAC system turns into a pumpkin in December, and we certainly cannot be without that service. So per policy, I'm just letting you folks know that we're going to forgo the bidding process and sign a contract for 18 months. While this will allow us to complete our energy audit, it does not make sense to go out to bid and switch vendors while we're just getting ready to do that. After the audit is complete, we'll go through that whole process. So that's just information. And letter B, resignations. Dawn Stevens, account payable coordinator, has submitted her resignation, as well as Pascal DeSole. She's a Freeport High School ed tech. And that's the end of the report from the superintendent this evening.
Questions for Jean?
Can I ask my question regarding the school psychologist at this point in time?
Sure.
So, with your last update to the board, I guess my question was, it's kind of a couple, I guess, combined together. If we're using, well, first, is the psychologist only to help with IEPs, or is it available for maybe high risk students that are identified by the staff?
It's a great question. So currently, the primary role of our school psychologists, they do a lot of the testing for IEPs, including the initial testing for identification, or if there's triannual evaluations as well. They'll do things like conduct behavioral observations and interviews. They'll do consults. They do a lot of interpreting results, not only of their own testing, but if there's any academic testing that's done. They're a resource to teachers, to staff. They help teams develop multi-tiered systems of support for kids. And they do some in-service training for us as well. Those other things, yes, they can, in terms of working with individual students, they can do that, but we have a capacity issue as well. So pretty much what our psychologists do right now are those things that I mentioned. As you know, we had one of our school psychologists resigned, and we had posted the position, and we did not find any applicants. So we still have these needs, which the testing needs, if you know the rules of special education, the clock starts ticking when you sign consent to test, and you have 45 school days to do that. So we are contracting with Presence Learning, and they are doing some of those evaluations online. And what that looks like is basically there's an RSU5 staff member with that student while they're doing that online testing. Certainly, our hope is next year we're going to continue with this, because now is not the time. There's always the right time when you go out for new folks, but we're certainly going to repost, because we prefer to have our own employee doing that. But that's where we're at right now.
Thank you.
Is there a downside to leaving a position posted in case, a good candidate came to us? Or?
Yeah, and there, we've had conversations about that. When you leave things dormant, people think, oh, they're not hiring, or they filled it, or why is it still there? Or are they still looking, and it's been posted for, 5 months. So we like to pull them down and then put them back out and make them fresh. And also we advertise on Serving Schools. It bumps it up. When you repost it, bumps it back up, and to take a fresh look at that. So we opted to pull it down now. We have reallocated those funds, obviously, for Presence Learning right now. It's just not the right time to go out.
So the psychology of posting for the psychologist.
It's the psychology of posting.
Just checking. Any other questions for Jean? Maura?
Thank you, Jean. Could you, and thank you, Daniel, for the question. Could you say more about the 45-day waiting period? What was that?
That's just there's federal laws that talk about how long we have to test a student. That's just one example. There's so many once we're in the process and we're doing, for example, an initial evaluation. We have only so many school days to complete an evaluation by law and bring it back to the team for consideration. So that it's all around the law.
Right. What's the start? What sort of initiates the start of that 45 days?
When the IEP team meets and the parent, they said, yes, we're going to test, and the parent signs consent to test, then the clock ticks.
Okay, thank you. That's interesting. I don't know a lot about that process. So
and June can certainly, you can add, when Dr. Sellers comes to do their report, they are much, that's their expertise, that they'd be happy to answer those too. Kelly.
So just so I understand, we do have a school psychologist currently, but it does not enough to meet our capacity.
We have one that we employ, and then the one we can't hire, we're using Presence Learning.
All right, so moving on to number 9, administrator reports. We will get into our goal review. So we are starting with community programs. Peter Wagner. blue sheets in your folders.
Hello, everybody. I guess I'd like to start just with a couple of pieces of news, good news from community programs. First of all, we've had a quite good week on the staffing front. We've just offered, and the offer has been accepted for our new athletics coordinator in the office. A gentleman by the name of Rocco Linehan is going to be joining us. So it's going to be great to be back to having a full team again. We've been down that one critical role since the beginning of the school year. So really excited to have
Would
him
you mind
coming
just
on.
being a little closer to the mic, Peter?
Oh, goodness. Okay. Usually I feel like I'm too close.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Uncomfortably close. That's what we say. That's how we like you to be to your mic.
Sorry, Sam. Thank you. Oh, there we go. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Yeah, so we'll be bringing Rocco on no later than December 5th and hopefully quite a bit earlier than that. We've also, for about a year and a half, had a vacancy for our full-time regular learning lab instructor. That's one of our instructors that works with our high-set equivalency degree students. And we've had one person, Rodney Richard, who used to be our full-time learning lab instructor, and then he left us and he became an ed tech at the middle school. And then when we lost our learning lab instructor, asked him if he would help keep us afloat for a while, and he very graciously said yes until we hire someone else. Anyway, I think we've finally found that person. We have a few more steps to go, but yeah, it's great that we've got some good new people coming into the office, hopefully very soon. And the other thing, and Gene, just give me a sign if you don't think this is the appropriate time for it any longer. But I was sharing with Gene the other day some information about our adult ed program and just the number of learners that we have in the mix right now, and she thought that it might be worth just sharing it with you all. As you know, our program has, well, much like our schools, has really changed a lot over the last 2 or 3 years as we've had the influx of asylum seekers that have come to town. And so just like the schools have had the younger learners, we've had often their parents. And so we've had a couple of waves that have come through and then dissipated again. And right now, our operation has 3 English instructors who are offering 9 sessions per week. For as long as I know, in the history of this office, long before I came to it in 2018, we were typically a 1 instructor with maybe 2 sessions a week and a handful of students. And we've really got a full and vibrant program with the English learners, especially right now, but also with our high set. We've had lots and lots of students who are coming to us, and there's no rhyme or reason to it. There's no way to predict necessarily when folks are going to find us, but we've had really a steady stream of folks coming to the door and saying that they'd like our services. So adult ed is really in great shape right now with the numbers of students that we have. And Lynn Kovich, who's our new adult ed coordinator who came on board in the spring, is just really doing a fantastic job of keeping all those plates spinning. So I just wanted to give you that update, or those updates, I should say. In regard to community programs goals, I think you have both last year's, what I reported to the group last year, and then also this year's. And just to take a peek back at 2023 goals, the first one that I put forth last year was establishing a partnership with Freeport Community Library to build a well-attended and effective after-school program for the middle school cohort. We are really, really, really good from K to 5. Lots of kiddos involved in our programs, recreation and enrichment. And once they get into middle school, they're a little bit harder to reach. It's a little bit harder for us to find exactly the right thing for them. The Port Teen Center, which is part of the space that we rent on the ground level of Freeport Community Services, used to be, back when it was a drop-in and there wasn't a whole lot of accountability for attendance, there used to be a lot of middle schoolers that would be there after school. Once we started keeping track of who was there, and if they said they were going to be there, we made note of it. The numbers really dropped, and it just hasn't rebounded. And what has become clear is that the Freeport Community Library has really opened their arms to the fact that sixth graders, especially some seventh graders and eighth graders, but mostly sixth graders, right after school, depending on the weather and depending on the season, um, they're just making the short walk through the woods, and they are taking advantage of the activities and just the space that they have at the library. And so the partnership that we formed is basically we're not going to try to fight the fact that no matter what we do, middle schoolers, sixth graders are going to be at the community library. So they have the space that's accessible and that the kids are familiar with and comfortable with. We've got the staffing, and so we put together their space, our staffing, and then some grant money from the Davis Family Foundation to help make this work. So it's called the Explore program, and right now, Chris Garrett, our rec and enrichment coordinator, has been managing that program. It's possible that we will be shifting some of the responsibilities to the new hire to let Chris focus more on enrichment. But the numbers have been really strong. So not just the raw numbers, but also the variety of kids that are taking part. So we're seeing more students that we didn't necessarily recognize their faces right away. So we're demonstrating that it's working up there, and I think it's just going to get better as the year goes on. So that's been a great start. So I would consider that goal to be achieved. The next goal from last year was the creation of the Axis of Awesome nonprofit consortium. So I've noted there that the goal is primarily achieved, but with some challenges. We have a great group of about 15 members representing 15 different organizations in the community, all nonprofits. And we've had 3 good meetings where we've been able to focus each conversation on something very specific that is that we all have in common, common challenges, common goals. And then over the summer, it proved that trying to have meetings in the summertime just was not all that great an idea. And then being short-staffed through the fall, haven't quite had a chance to get that fired up again. But I see members of that group regularly. We talk, we sort of affirm with one another that we're going to keep it going. So I hope to have another meeting of that group soon. And yeah, it's just a nice way that, we have so many similarities, so many commonalities with the people that we serve and our missions and the things that we're trying to accomplish for the community. And it just feels like oftentimes we are just missing each other from a lack of awareness of like, oh, you're doing this big event at that time. I was thinking about a big event roughly the same time. So we inadvertently are stumbling on each other. So a little bit of coordination there, I think, will go a long way. And then the third goal, completing the work of opening and marketing the new Laugh and Learn Center at Mass Landing and considering avenues to expand Laugh and Learn coverage to the RSU5 community. So the good news there, and the part of the goal that I can say is achieved, is that we very happily, for the first time, opened a Laugh and Learn Center at Pownell Elementary School this year. So for the first time, Laugh and Learn is serving all 3 of the communities in RSU5 in those schools. So we're very excited about that, and it's going well. But I learned my lesson about putting eggs into a goal basket of things that are just way beyond our control. And this mobile, the new portable that was dropped at Mass Landing School almost 2 years ago, it's still not open. We are really hopeful that will occur this school year at some point. But again, learning my lessons, I'm not going to make any guesses about when that might happen. It's been a series of unexpected challenges, code issues, sprinkler systems that were installed when it was produced in a different state that weren't up to main codes and needed to be sort of fitted and changed, and water lines and water pressure to those sprinkler systems and having to run second lines. It's been quite a process, and my goodness, we're now on our 3rd facilities director who is getting migraines from this. So yeah, I'm sure it's a coincidence that, yeah. So anyway, there's a great building that really has a lot of awesome furniture that is in it but not set up, and it's going to be a really welcoming place for our Laugh and Learn kids, both for the preschool and for before and after school care once it's open. So that will, I did not pull that forward in my goals for 24, by the way. Okay, and looking ahead at this year, so the first is recreation focused. And there might be a little bit of self-interest in this particular goal, but in partnership with nearby organizations, specifically the Portland Rugby Football Club, Bowdoin College, and the New England Free Jacks, which is the Major League Rugby professional club that's based in Boston. We would like to be part of establishing a youth rugby program with an eye on growing to a regional league. I've made contact with a gentleman by the name of Gareth Roberts, who is a member of the Portland Rugby Club. He's also the head coach for the men at Bowdoin College. And he has a pretty well articulated plan of, okay, here's how we can get a youth rugby program off the ground in Maine. There really isn't one anywhere in the state right now. There are other places in New England where we do have these things. We think it would be a great extension of our recreation program and could live very comfortably with the other sports that we offer. So we're hopeful that Portland, Freeport, and Lewiston Auburn will be three sort of hub areas for this new youth program. So I'm really excited about seeing if we can get that off the ground for the coming year. The second goal is more in line with adult enrichment, and that is finally completing my dream of completely plagiarizing the Davidson, North Carolina Community Programs Office and creating a Civics 101 program for our residents here in RSU5. And this is basically, it's a 6 or 8 week program where adults in the community can register for the program and come in each week for thoughtful discussions and Q&A sessions with decision makers in the municipal structure and maybe even school district of their community. So it would probably be based either in the schools or at town hall. We would have a lot of participation from town manager, town planning, codes, fire and rescue, and perhaps RSU5 as well. So it's a chance for people just to know the personalities of people who are making decisions in town and how those decisions are made, to have a chance to ask questions and just be better informed citizens. Yeah, it's been really successful in Davidson. I lived around that program for a few years down there, and just folks really get a lot out of it. The one thing about that program and being a part of RSU5 that will just make it a little bit interesting and could benefit from some additional discussion, and I'd love to hear your ideas over time if you have some, which is Freeport and Durham and Pownell are very different communities. Their municipal structures are different. And so is our Civics 101 class, is it a single class where we try to have a little bit from each of the 3 towns, or is this perhaps 3 separate programs where residents of Durham take part there, Pownell there, and Freeport here? So that's, to me, that's really the one sort of operational question that remains to be answered. But I'm looking forward to putting that together and having that ready, hopefully next fall, about a year from now. And the final goal I've put forth for this year is, again, thinking about the ML families and the asylees that we have in town. And we still are just missing out on getting the kids involved in our programs. And it's not sticker shock. It's not the fees, because we are completely ready to scholarship these families if they need it. It's in part transportation, and I also just think that there are some basic differences of understanding about the sort of things that we offer, and just the expectation that these families may have about what they're welcome to do, or even just having us in their consciousness. And last year, it took a lot of very specific, personal, individualized effort. We got a number of kids that we got into our rec basketball program, and it really wore a couple of people down. It took a lot of folks, especially Lynn Shea, took this under her wing in a lot of ways. And it was an example of finding a way to make something work, but it wasn't really a sustainable plan. We need to put some more thought into this. We need to get kids into our summer camps because, my goodness, being cooped up in the hotels, not just during the school year, but all summer long, that's just a tough way to go. So we want to find a way to break through that. And we think that with some collaboration and coordination with principals and ML specialists at the schools, also a handful of the asylees that we are acquainted with now, who might be able to give us some windows into, okay, here's how to break through. We think that with that support, we'll be able to find a plan that can at least start to get where we want to be. So yeah, we think that's really important. We've got group of folks who are part of our community, and seems to be a sense of permanence there. And so we want to get them into our programs, especially the kids. So that's a look back at last year and a look forward to the coming year. And I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Questions for Peter?
I know is my mic on? Okay. I know it's not on your goals for next year, with the portable, but you will definitely let us know when you get that open, right?
Yes. Yes. It might be one of those things where I'm going to have to be really, really sure that what I see is happening. But yes, as soon as I'm
We're going to
convinced-
wrap it in a bow.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, I will be very happy to make that report when the time comes. Yeah.
Kelly?
Yeah, I've just had a question in terms of your last goal.
Mhm.
Do you foresee that getting more of these people involved will affect your budget asks in terms of maybe how you transport them to events and such?
Transportation that's just the $1 million question for everyone right now. It's affecting the way we are working with the adult English learners. And it certainly is a part of the picture for our camps and for our after school programs. So for things like after school programs and rec sports, youth sports, we, I think, are going to be able to rely heavily on parents of other children that are on those teams to say, okay, I live in the south end of town. I'll commit to picking up this one child, bringing them to every practice and game, and then bringing them home at the end of the day. It's really challenging when we don't have a way to bring large groups who are all living in one place to where we want to be. So exploring grant funding is one possibility there. But that's transportation is absolutely one of our biggest obstacles that we're going to have to get over. I'm not sure if that's really fully answering your question or not, but it's, it sure is. Yeah.
And I guess I'll just take this moment to remind folks that the way community programs and Peter's programs work is a little bit different than all the other schools. We don't fund any of the recreational programs that they do. We only fund the adult ed programs, the high set program, through an allocation to them. Everything else is funded through all the other stuff that they do. So the board isn't, we don't have a transportation line for Peter in our budget. That comes out of Peter's enterprise fund.
And I always do appreciate members of the board asking, the health of our finances, and when we have, when we approach something and it has significant expenses, how are we going to take care of that? I always appreciate the interest. And between volunteers and the potential for grant money with, hiring outside bus services, I think that this could be done.
I was curious, one about the Explorer program at the library. Did that just start this fall?
Yes.
Okay, great. And then the other was around Laugh and Learn in Pownell. So 11 kids is a fantastic start. Like, what's their capacity? Is that kind of their max? I know it's a staffing question more, right?
Well, it is. So So working with school age children, so 5 years of age and older, so it's a little bit tricky. Our some of the things that we do are based on grade, and other things are based on age. And when it comes to our DHHS childcare license, it's very much about age. So 3 and 4-year-olds are treated differently as far as the ratio of adults that need to be with them. If they're 5 and older, it's 13 to 1. So if we have one provider at Pownell, then theoretically we are allowed to have them with 13 children if they're by themselves. Even when those kids are a little bit older, 13 to 1 is that's a tall order. That's tough in a less structured environment after school. There's a lot of kinetic activity going on. That can be a challenge. So we want to be cautious about that. We think 11 is about the maximum that we would want to do with a single provider. It is not out of the question that we could try to find a second provider to go there so that we could raise the head count. My understanding is that along with the 11 who are in the program right now, there are 3 or 4 other interested families. That's anecdotal. We don't necessarily have them on a waiting list, but yeah, wouldn't it be nice if we could get a second person who was there 5 days a week, and we could serve everyone who wants it.
That was my next question is do you have more people interested than are in there now? So it sounds like maybe.
Right. Yeah. To my knowledge, they haven't gone onto our waiting list and officially requested it, but we have heard from our providers in Pownell, people they know in town, like, oh yeah, they might be interested as well. So, yeah.
Other questions for Peter? Oh, Kelly.
Yeah, I'm just kind of curious about where the rugby came from, and then if you have community members that are already sort of interested in this.
England. Sorry. You may or may not have heard me say there's a little bit of self-interest in it. I happen to have a son who is deep into rugby right now. And earlier this fall, we received an inquiry from the Portland Rugby Football Club, and they said, hey, we've been put on the task by the Free Jacks, by the major league team in Boston, to find a location in Maine where they can host a youth clinic and a college ID camp for aspiring rugby players. And they had practiced at our field before, so the first call they made was to us. And I said, well, my son has played in the Free Jacks Development Academy, and boy, I would love to have a rugby thing here. Wouldn't that be great? So we scheduled that for the beginning of October. I also then made a call to the University of Maine to see if they would play their home game that weekend on the Freeport turf the night before. So we had kind of a rugby weekend here at the beginning of October. There were a good number of people in the crowd. There were a lot of folks who expressed some enthusiasm about maybe trying to start something here. And it was at that point that I was contacted by Gareth Roberts from Bowdoin. I think that there's interest in this community for this. So I've gotten a lot of really good feedback about it. Yeah, I think it would be a nice addition. We haven't really added, when it comes to sports, team sports, we haven't added anything here in quite a while. So rugby's a possibility. And then Rocco, who's going to be joining our office soon, is a professional ultimate Frisbee player. So he brings some interesting passions with him as well. And wouldn't that be an interesting angle to pursue?
When you say youth, like what are we talking? Like how old can they? Yeah. Are we talking like are we back at the 5-year-olds playing rugby and like laugh and learn
yeah. Oh, that's it. There it is, right there. Excellent. So when the Free Jacks did their youth clinic, it was first grade and up, and so with the littles, they do it very much like flag football. They play modified rugby rules with the flag, so there's not as much physical contact. So it's a much safer sort of thing for them. But that's the way to get them started at that age. Rugby is an interesting sport in that people who play it at a relatively high level, or people who get into it in their college years, that's often the first time they've been exposed to it. And especially for those who grew up in Maine where there aren't youth programs. But in a lot of places in America, it's part of the culture. It's a big part of youth sports.
Anything else for Peter? Thank you.
Great. Thanks, everybody.
All right. So we will move on to the update from transportation with Jeremy Osnell. Marigold in your
Good evening.
folders.
Item 9B in your orange paper. Starting out with my predecessor's 22-23 goals. Fleet upgrade, purchase 177 passenger powered gasoline school bus. Thanks. Cleaner burning than diesel fuel, better lifespan than diesel fuel. Gasoline is available at the bus garage readily. 126-23, we purchased a 2023 conventional 83 passenger diesel school bus. Diversity and equity, inclusion, we will continue to train on diversity, equality, and inclusion at upcoming meetings throughout the year. Prior to 22-23 school year, all drivers completed required training prior to start of school. No additional training during the meetings due to change in leadership throughout the school year.
It says there was initially they wanted to buy a gasoline powered school bus, but we ended up getting a diesel powered school bus. I'm just kind of curious what changed people's
The
minds.
gasoline school bus had to be built and ordered. The diesel school bus was on the lot and the cost was quite a bit less. And got here a lot quicker. 22-23, complete an evaluation of fleet, including buses and vans. Collaborate with the district mechanic to evaluate age, mileage, and condition of vehicle. Fleet documentation, timeline December 23. Develop a timeline for replacement of vehicles. Based on the evaluation of the fleet, develop a comprehensive timeline for replacement of all vehicles. December 22, 2023, replacement timeline. Increase recruitment and retention of drivers. Attend job fairs to recruit new drivers. Collaborate with human resources coordinator to strategize advertisement models. 2023-24, retention of drivers and addition of drivers.
How many bus drivers are we currently, would we love to hire if they were qualified and walked in your door?
6.
6. And how many do we have?
25? No. Yeah,
Okay.
6. 15.
So about 3/4 of the way staffed.
Yes.
Did we talk about in the past the changing of the bus driver training potentially? Was that mentioned previously?
We do currently have a training session, a trainer in-house that we use at training. And he is currently training some drivers.
Was the question around whether the required training from the state had changed to make it easier to?
Yes, I thought the state, and then I had wondered, well, how are we making it easier but still safe for everybody on the bus?
The stuff they changed was more towards the part of getting your license, like, I don't want to say it, like the pre-trip inspection, and they put in some fast track classes to get drivers trained quicker to get them out there in the field is more what they changed.
Other questions? So the documentation of the fleet, did that come about because we ended up buying a fair amount of like vans and, you know, smaller vehicles over the last
The
several
van
years?
fleet has grown, yes, a lot.
Okay. So this isn't necessarily about the buses so much as more all the other vehicles that we have in the fleet and what the replacement plan is for those, because a lot of those were through COVID funds and things
Right.
like that, right?
And now we got to maintain them once we own them.
Right.
And we do have some that are higher mileage and due to be replaced.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Next up, 9C is the update from Facilities Department. Glenn Reynolds.
Tilt it down.
We start with Peter and just
Right, I know, right? Next time we got to go the other way.
Yeah.
Start with the small guy first. Got it? I do? Right up to it? Really? Like this? Good evening, everyone. So I wanted to go over my predecessor's goals. As you know, I'm still relatively new. So to go over those was to conduct an energy audit to identify needs, improving the RSU5 facilities. That was the timeline was early December 2022. Unfortunately, that was incomplete due to the change. Also to conduct a water use saving audit. That was after the completion of the energy audit. Continue to prioritize a 5-year capital plan, collaborating with all stakeholders. The timeline on that was 23. Projects that were slated to be completed on the capital plan. We did do the maintenance drop trailer. We also did the maintenance truck body, PES steamer, Moore Street School elevator, Mass Landing steamer and range, Mass Landing exterior door, and Freeport Middle School siding. Some of the incomplete due to the change was Pownell Elementary security and Pownell Elementary paved rear walkway. Training will continue. All facility personnel completed required training prior to the start of the school year. No additional training during meetings due to change in leadership. So rolling into my goals. Sorry, I don't know what color that is. Purple. Perfect. Sorry, I should have started with that. So going into 23-24 goals is to replace the Pownell septic leach field. The timeline is 23-24. We did hire a civil engineering firm out of Scarborough to do a design build. So they're currently working on that. Once the design build is done, we'll be able to put that out to bid to get an idea exactly what the costs are. My hopes are to have that underway late spring, early summer. The next one is to conduct a full energy audit, including the water usage. Typically, they tie into one. The timeline for that would be 23-24, and we'll report that out to the facility committee and the board. Doing a conduct a comprehensive building assessment. I know all of you know that the tour tomorrow, so I'm looking forward to that. And then we'll report that out as well. And then my last one is to complete the following 22-23 carryover items, which is the PES security and the paving of the rail walkway. And that'll be done 23-24. Also not on there, Mass Landing, mod, major goal. That will get done. Just saying. Okay. Any questions?
Beth.
What exactly is the Pownell security that needs to be updated?
A lot of that was the camera systems, PA systems, which ties into the phone system as well. And I've been working with Sam on that to take a look at that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Absolutely. Cameras, I believe, is in that as well.
So if I recall, the Pownell leach field was not on the plan for this year originally.
Oh, man.
So, so I'm curious, what on the capital plan that we were planning to do this year are we putting off in order to accomplish the leach field?
So the 5-year plan, sitting down with Gene, we're, we've kind of taken a look at that, but the leach field has taken the priority over everything. So we're kind of in the middle, especially where we're looking at possible vendors to do the energy audit on shifting a lot of the 5-year plan. So to answer your question, I don't particularly have an answer right yet because things are still kind of a moving target. And a lot of those things that were on the capital plan will be conducted through the energy audit with doors and windows, that type of thing, ventilation. So that will fall into the 5-year plan. So I wouldn't say anything's going to be pushed off. It's getting reallocated, but I wouldn't say, 2 years out, 3 years out on what those specific items would be.
Okay, because if I recall correctly, we have the 5-year and even a 10-year plan, but there's one for the year we're in. We had specific things that we were going to use the 400 that we have typically allocated for capital improvements.
Mhm.
So obviously, nothing on the list is not needed at some point. It's just a matter of when. So
Right.
I was just curious if there was something that we knew we weren't going to get to this year that we expected to because of the leach field.
Nope. And without the dollar number for the leach field, I wouldn't be able to tell you that. I know it's going to take. I just don't know how big of a portion it's going to take.
Thanks so much for this. Yeah, my question is sort of related to that. Is that I know that last year when I was on the safety committee, we had identified a variety of things that across all of the facilities that we needed to do to address various needs. So I guess I'm just curious because I think some of those were, in my understanding, were going to be addressed this year. So I guess I'm just curious sort of how that's being, because those safety and security measures, the panel included, seem very important to have
Oh, absolutely.
taken care of. So I'm wondering whether if we got to a point where I'm not sure this question for you or for Michelle or Jean, but if we got to a point where we identified that yes, the septic leach field project plus all of the necessary security and safety projects are going to take us above 400, what is our contingency for that?
Very good question. And without getting a dollar number on what it's going to cost to fix the leach field, I wouldn't be able to do that assessment. So once we get that number, I'm happy to go over the list and talking with Jean to figure out what we can and cannot do. I just don't think it'd be fair to answer that question yet.
And if I could just add as well is that one thing that I think Glenn is doing is really looking more systemically at what needs to be done for some of those things, because you do get a bigger bang for your buck when you're looking at projects, the same project in multiple buildings. So he's looking at that as well. And what those things, we'll try to ping off the things we can, but then look more globally about what those things that need to be done.
Other questions for Glenn? All right, he didn't put it on his purple paper, but we all heard him. Mass
did.
Landing, it's opening.
Write it down.
Big
Wait,
bow.
did Peter hear it? Peter heard it. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. And last but certainly not least from this evening's goal review, I was hoping we were going to start with some kind of video vlog.
Part of me wanted to walk in with my pack on my back, I
you
just
literally
come
right
off the trail.
So anyway, Mass Landing School, Emily Grimm.
Hi, it's nice to see, especially those who I haven't met yet. I thought I'd segue. I got teed up perfectly for the portable because we started off our school year by welcoming the highest number of students that we've had at Mass Landing in my 8 years there, which is 284 students. 33 of those were students who are new to district. So either students who moved in or students who transferred from a private school into the public school setting. So it's exciting to have such a full building. We're also really excited. One notable change we've made this year is a shift in our schedule. We've added a 15-minute block in the mid-morning that we call the Daily Mile, where the whole school, every single individual, we close the building. So even our front office secretary is able to go out and walk or run. It's adult and student choice for those 15 minutes as a way to address some of the needs that I'll speak to a little bit in our goals. But it's one of the things I underestimated when we put it in was just the beauty of seeing some of the cross grade, including the preschoolers who do it with us. So many of our older kids are hand in hand or running alongside our 4-year-olds, which is pretty cool. So we're excited about the portable, but happy that we'll still have our youngest kids on site. So looking back at our goals from last year, a primary focus was on chronic absenteeism. And this is not a challenge that's unique to Mass Landing or to RSU5. It's a national trend looking at really high chronic absenteeism rates, but is certainly an area of concern for us, not just because it impacts the students who are out of the building, but also the impact on the classroom community and culture when teachers are regularly playing catch up to get students who are out of school caught up when they return. And so we tried to create tighter systems for tracking our data and also responding. And so in the front office, we created a tighter system. So I get daily notification of kids who are noted as absent who are on our watch list. So we set thresholds for kids who have met that threshold for chronic absenteeism, as well as kids who are at risk, so that I'm able to make phone calls home day of, and where possible, sometimes that involves picking a student up or otherwise communicating with the parent to try to intervene early in the day and get students in. So that was one piece of the work we did. We also increased our universal communication to all families, just ensuring families know that this is a problem we're experiencing. It impacts the whole school community, and that parents are aware of the severity of the impact. I think the first email last year when I shared the data, a handful of parents reached out and were really quite surprised that, on any given day, like 1 in 8 to usually about 1 in 8 kids is out of the building for the full day. That doesn't include partial day absences. The other thing we continue to do is thinking proactively is how do we ensure school is a place that kids really want to be and that they have a strong sense of belonging. And so continuing to lean on some of the practices we already have in place, like responsive classroom and morning meeting, focusing on our mentorship program. We have volunteer mentors who come in and setting up some activities that are just plain old fun, like some staff and student snowball fights, indoor snowball fights, not chunks of ice outside, and bingo games and other kind of friendly opportunities for kids to feel a sense of connection with the adults in the building that are in addition to those that they feel during the school day. Another body of work focused on deepening our staff understanding around word study instruction. And we started a pilot last year that has extended longer than we anticipated. So teachers from all of the elementary schools that have grades 3, 4, and 5 in the district, there were representatives from all three schools. And last spring, piloted some options, reported back, have eliminated some, and are exploring a couple of others for the coming year. So that's extended longer than we've anticipated. We also did a school-wide book study just to deepen the foundation. So when we ultimately adopt a word study curriculum at the 3 through 5 grade span, that teachers will have the foundation of knowledge to add to build the curriculum onto. You'll see there's one note too. There was a piece, I got a little ambitious last year and had hoped to do some work around calibrating writing. So really deepening our understanding of like, what are we expecting of 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade writers, doing more vertical alignment. So teachers, because of course, every teacher has students in their classrooms who are writing at grade levels other than the grade level they're in, both above and below, and ensuring teachers have clarity on how to support the variety of learners in front of them. That piece is tabled right now because it just is not practical to take on with the other pieces of work we've committed to. That will segue into our work this year. While we were excited to see a notable decrease in our chronic absenteeism, quite frankly, it's just not at a place that you were yet satisfied with it. We'd love to see it below 10%. And so we're continuing to focus on this area. Some of it is beginning last year. I think we focused a lot on the systems to ensure that we were aware of and responding when kids hit that threshold. And I think this year our work remains in thinking kind of at the tier 2 level. So like if you think of tier 1 being universal, what all kids get, tier 2 is now that we have this greater awareness of who we're concerned about, either because they've been chronically absent the prior year or because they hit that threshold this year. What are the more proactive structures we're going to build into place to help get those kids to school? So this might be attendance plans that are in coordination with families. It might have being that a child checks in with a beloved staff member when they get to school each morning and maybe has breakfast for 5 minutes with that staff member. It's going to involve a lot of different sorts of solutions because the kids, have different needs and different circumstances, but really looking at how we begin to continue chipping away at this challenge. I talked a little bit about the Daily Mile as a way to look at just student well-being. This is related to chronic absenteeism, but we're seeing more and more students and parents refer for counseling support. And in reflecting on that, it's substantial enough that it feels no longer appropriate to respond case by case. In other words, it's, a parent might call and say, my child is struggling with this. Do you have a social worker that he or she can speak with? And particularly in conversations with our school counselor, the sense that, like, what is in our control? What levers do we have that can help address student well-being that are not about individual students, but about our collective community? And one of those we felt like was ensuring kids are getting about an hour outside every day, engaged in movement. And so this was one kind of remedy to that. And it was put in place based on movement, but interestingly, it feels like, kind of qualitatively, when I'm out there with the kids, that we're also getting a huge benefit in the sense of connection and belonging with kids. It's the one time of day that we are entirely cross grade level. So I see my own third grader walking with fifth graders. I get to walk and run with a variety of kids. You see kids who don't yet, third graders talking to fifth grade teachers, fifth grade or third teachers talking to the kids they had last year. There just seems to be a lot more engagement and communication across kids and staff, which feels great if we're thinking about, okay, how are we encouraging kids to be at school each day, and how are we modeling for them and really setting the expectation about what it means to be a healthy human being? So that's one little piece we've added as well to help support this challenges we're seeing with chronically absent students. And the other is to continue to work on the communication to parents and ensuring parents have clarity. I'll say this is a really challenging one. So Sunday, when I sat down to eat my breakfast, the New York Times had an article specifically on families taking vacations during school, and this being a national trend. And it's a tricky one. And I will say it is a pervasive issue that I am almost daily signing planned absence forms for absences that are 5 or more consecutive school days. And I think the thing that's important to know is the impact is bigger than those families who are pulling their kids out of school. So that's an area we'll continue to work on. The other piece this year, as we dive into our work, comes in recognition of some of the shifts in skills we're seeing students enter our school with. And I think there are lots of reasons for these shifts, but we're just noticing a greater need to think systemically about the way we support social emotional learning. And that's both explicit, like our students have weekly SEL lessons, but also being more intentional about the ways we're embedding practice in all parts of our day, from morning meeting, from the way partnerships talk to one another in writing workshop, to the way a group might be working together with their whiteboards, to the way kids solve problems at recess. And that's some of the work actually we'll be doing tomorrow during the PLD, but making sure we're providing time for teachers both to dig in. We're using the CASEL standards to ground this work, but teachers to both dig into those standards and really think about how those standards can be embedded in the work that they're already doing. Interestingly, that work, we didn't kind of think of that adoption as a way to address chronic absenteeism, but as schools that have robust SEL programming also have lower rates of chronic absenteeism. So I think it will support that work as well. And then, like I said, you'll see some of the work around writing tabled, but we are going to continue to work on some vertical collaboration across grades 3 and 4 and 5. So teachers have that vertical understanding and deepen their understanding to support the variety of learners that are in front of them each and every day. Questions? That was a lot.
Danielle.
Maybe I missed and I apologize, but what's the definition of chronic absenteeism? Is it a kid who's missing 1 day a week? They've missed, like you mentioned, 5 days in a row for a vacation. Like, how do we identify that?
Thanks for the question, because I should have clarified that. So it's defined by the state, and it's a student who misses 10% or more of the school year for any reason. So in our case, any student who misses 18 days of school. And I did look from a qualitative perspective to try to identify trends and patterns. And we're getting a mix. We're getting some kids who are missing 1 or 2 days every other week. We're getting some kids who are taking a week-long vacation in the fall, a week-long vacation in the spring, and then getting COVID, right? And then having a couple other days. So it's a combination of kids who are having these extended absences, as well as kids who are having an ongoing consistent pattern. And that's what I mean about the response. Like the response looks different, right, for those two types of absenteeism. And it's whether it's excused or unexcused, it falls under that threshold. It's different than truancy. Truancy is based on students who have unexcused absences.
I asked that only because I sometimes pull my kids during the school year. Not so much because my daughter is in high school and that's a no-no according to her. But it's hard, right? I can see why parents do it because for my job, right, there's 3 people. We all 3 can't take vacation over February vacation. So I think that's the shift. And I don't know how. I'd be interested. Did the New York Times have anything to comment on that? Like how do you do that?
Yeah. So some of it's financial. Like the article really kind of hypothesizes why it's happening, right? The hypotheses are like shifts post-COVID. We all kind of feel like, there's a sense of like life is short, like quality time is important. I know for my family, even like we had more time during COVID than we've ever had, right? And there's that sense, I'm coming off that, right? The sense of like, oh, like getting to savor my family, the challenges financially, the challenges logistically. And I think here's the thing, is a 1-week vacation the problem we're talking about? No, because think of 18 days. That's a month of school, right? And so we have 13% of our kids missing a month of school, right? Even higher if we're looking at our middle and high school, right, in districts. So I think that it's not like the singular vacation, but it's thinking holistically about the like Friday ski days, right? Plus the week-long vacation, plus you got sick unexpectedly because kids get sick, right? So it's that holistic picture. So it's not to come down on I understand parents make a variety of decisions based on a variety of factors, but when we look at the holistic picture, 18 days is a lot of school. It's a lot of school. And when you think, I looked at kids, I had a 5th grader last year who had missed, since he entered kindergarten, a full year of school.
Yeah, so you mentioned that this is a national trend. I'm assuming it began sometime around COVID, maybe shortly thereafter. And so I'm also assuming you're probably speaking with other principals and administrators who are trying to deal with this problem in their own regions. And I'm curious about how our decrease in absenteeism is comparing to some of these other districts, how we're doing.
I didn't have the ability to gather data from other neighboring districts on what their decrease has been. I did look at our building alongside other schools in the district to see, like, are we seeing a trend? Generally, nationally, the data is slightly better, right? If you picked any old school out of, the middle of Kansas, their data should have improved from the previous year, from 2 years ago to last year, because you're right, it was an extension of COVID and like shifts in habits and routines coming out of that. There were 2 schools in the district that essentially were flat, and others had some improvement. Our improvement was slightly better than the other schools. So I think some of it is like there's this momentum shift, and I think growing awareness of it. But certainly these numbers still far surpass what rates would have been prior to COVID.
Do you have a sense of where Mass Landing was relative to the other? Were you the norm in RSU5?
We were not. We were slightly worse. We were just below the high school. And I think for like a variety of reasons, we would probably assume the high school would have the highest rate of chronic absenteeism, even though high schoolers can't miss school.
My 2 high schoolers are A-okay missing a week in December. It's a good note. I need to email their teachers.
And then so the state trend, I attended a webinar a couple weeks ago, right when I'd gotten back, and it showed the state data by grade level. And so it's like highest K1 dips towards 3 and 4, and then begins climbing 5, and it looks almost linear 5 through 12, right? So like kids, the grade level that's doing the best, or statewide, is 4th grade, right? And I think there are a lot of factors too, because at our grade span, we're also balancing, okay, like what's a family support? When are we supporting a family, right? Versus when are we supporting the child individually? At our span, it's usually both, right? Because they're connected, right? Especially if we're looking at students who are missing a day or 2 every other week. That's often a logistical issue. The parent leaves early, the child doesn't wake up to an alarm, or the older sibling was supposed to get them up and didn't, or they missed the bus and they don't have transportation, right? Those solutions look different than some of the others.
About your daily mile, which I think is really fantastic, but I'm just curious. I know time is very short, so to add in something for 15 minutes, what was the give on that?
Yeah, so we shaved 5 minutes off each of our academic blocks to do that. We paired it, and it'll be interesting what our reflections are as a building. We paired it adjacent to a recess, in part to eliminate a transition, particularly in the winter. But some of the feedback I have received from staff is they'd actually prefer that it be 3 separate opportunities for kids to have movement. So that'll be something as we get into some of the winter months and see how it fleshes out logistically, doing some reflection on that piece.
Do you get any pushback from staff?
Not a one.
Perfect. Malik.
You mentioned a mentorship program a bit. I was wondering if you could talk more about that.
Yeah, so we have Susan Albertini, our school counselor, helps coordinate it through a couple very passionate community members who have helped to work to develop a cadre of adults, from their 20s through their 70s, who meet and have lunch and spend recess with students a day each week. And it's just meant to be a strong connection for those kids in addition to the school community.
Kelly?
Yeah, I was just curious if you've noticed yet any decreases in referrals for counseling or mental health services since you've implemented some of these strategies, including your 15-minute mile.
It's interesting you asked that, because in my perfect world, I would have partnered with like a graduate institution to do this holistic research study on it, because I didn't get great control data, in part because I wasn't here yet. And the other thing that's a little bit tricky is the last 2 weeks, for understandable reasons with what happened in Lewiston. We've seen a particularly high number of kids that are accessing those services. I think in a perfect world, and interestingly, I'm like, okay, we will have control data always with our incoming third, essentially right now. So something I would like to look at is being a little bit more systematic in what data we collect to assess that very topic of like student well-being, kind of what is the impact of this on the school community. That feels a little bit more tangible, right? I'd say kids largely love it. That's been my experience when I talk to students about it. But again, like, because I didn't get that data from last year on the number of referrals, I know Susan Albertini is keeping that data for this year, but I don't have the pre-data.
Colin.
A couple of questions, sort of returning to the absenteeism. So you mentioned that there is a difference between truancy and chronic absenteeism. What is that difference?
So truancy for students at our age span is defined as 5 consecutive unexcused absences or 7 unexcused absences within the school year. And for truancy, essentially, it's a violation of the attendance laws in the state, and it can result in a referral to DHHS. So it, in some ways, so like has different teeth, but quite frankly, really doesn't either. And to be really frank, is often, if we looked at the difference between kids who are truant versus kids who are hitting the threshold for chronic absenteeism, is simply whether parents are calling the school to let us know the reason. Because we excuse an absence if a family submits a planned absence form. Before their absence, it's excused. That's our practice across all our buildings. And so often those cases of truancy are when parents have neglected to do that, or have neglected to call or respond to our calls when their child's absent, and then it gets marked as unexcused.
Yeah, that's really helpful, because I think one of my questions was just about at what point are families, parents and guardians in some sort of at some sort of risk. It sounds like with truancy, there's a referral to DHHS potentially, but you're suggesting that doesn't necessarily have a great deal of teeth to it. So I guess just one question is there any, at a certain point, is there any risk for families for their children to be chronically absent, or is that really an impact that the student and then the school absorbs?
It's an impact the school absorbs, and the student as well. And I think, parents, I've had some pretty transparent conversations with parents who like, and understandably want to make decisions for their family that work for their family. And it's like a tricky thing of balancing that individual versus the collective needs of the school. And the challenges for teachers when 2 or 3 of their kids are out every day, because the result is then instruction the next day. Some of that instructional time in that 55 minutes of writing is then spent for the kids who weren't there the previous day, right? And we know some of that's inevitable because kids get sick. I don't want to paint the wrong picture of it. So we expect some level of absence. That's why we don't give perfect attendance awards, right? We understand those things happen. It's the issue of the volume, right? The volume of days. And no, when we're looking at that 13% who have missed 10% or more, many of those kids have missed more than 10%, right? So it's 18 days would be the threshold to hit that, but we have other kids who are into the 20s and higher.
I guess my last question on that is I think the goals you set and the things that you're implementing sound great, and then I hope that leads to the under 10% that you're looking to and getting to, because that would be kind of pre-COVID numbers, right? I guess I'm just curious whether there's any conversation either at your school or whether any conversation that you're aware of, because that's all sort of on the mitigation side. And I guess I'm just curious on the adaptation side of whether there are things that we need to be looking at in terms of our planning, just the way that we're approaching our pedagogy and the way that we're setting benchmarks that will at some point have to shift if this trend does not move.
It's a great question. I think part of me would love to see some longitudinal data we don't yet have, right? I mean, we track things longitudinally, of course, every year we share that data. It would be interesting to disaggregate what we're seeing for those kids who are chronically absent and their growth alongside what we see as, for lack of a better word, typical growth. I think that, and I'll say the other thing, I'm not totally answering your question, Colin, but another thought that comes to mind is the social and emotional impact for kids too, when that sense of like community is not stable, right? Either for the individual or the other kids. So I think that's the other piece that like you'll see some of this is that response is like trying to think, okay, like we do need to better support kids. There are skills we're teaching kids explicitly that we didn't teach kids explicitly before, right? Like listening to one another, not interrupt. Like there are skills that we would not typically think of 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade skills that we're seeing. And I think that's reflective of a handful of things. It's not just chronic absenteeism, but I think that's a small piece of like how we need to reassess what we're doing. And also like making sure like school does need to be a place kids want to be, right? Of course, at this age, it's not just kids deciding to be at school, right? Because there are adults who are helping to direct those decisions, hopefully.
Any other? Oh, Danielle.
Sorry. Well, now that we heard your numbers, I guess it's more of a question for Jean. Could we see the numbers, I guess, across the board for every school? And maybe I'd like to think we don't have any truancy kids, but could we see those numbers too? I guess I'm kind of interested to see where we are sitting.
I'll send it. Paula pulled it for me. I'll send it to you. Does that work?
And while we're pulling it, if there's any sort of, standard, the state of Maine, the country, whatever, just so we know, are we good, bad, and different?
Yeah, I'll say nationally, the numbers, it depends on the organization you get the information from. Nationally, it's about 25%. So that's like
25%?
Right. Correct.
Well, then you're killing it, Emily. Well done.
But our standard isn't the national state. Like that's, I get that it's better than 25%, but that's not our goal.
Other questions for Emily? Thank you.
Thanks.
Welcome back.
Thanks.
All right. So we are moving on to 13, new business. Do I have a motion for consideration and approval to request a waiver for non-school days for October 26, 27, 2023 through the Maine Department of Education? Beth and Carolyn. Great. She did. It doesn't mean you approve it. You just seconded the motion. So, yeah, just getting it on the floor for discussion. Yep. You haven't voted yet. Don't worry.
And if I could explain a little bit about this, normally, and when we have usually a snow event, we'll say a weather event, often snow. What happens is we will make up that school day at the end of the school year for instruction. That is generally our practice. But we're in certainly a unique situation with what happened in Lewiston. We lost 2 school days that week, excuse me. Part of it, Durham was under a shelter-in-place order, prohibited us from opening that school. And also we had over 90 members of our staff residing in communities that were under shelter-in-place. So we had no other choice but to close our district for those 2 days. Certainly, we have had so many folks that have been affected personally by this. And I know Emily in her report tonight even mentioned there were students at Mass Landing that are affected. We've had staff members that have shared that they had personal relationship with some of those folks that lost their lives. We've had people that just from being sheltered in place. We've had members of our staff who have members of their family that were part of law enforcement, that were part of the search in Lewiston. So it certainly is, even on RSU5, it's certainly impacted folks. And so I'm recommending that we request a waiver for those school days to allow our families, our students, our staff time to heal, put that behind them. Snow is coming. There are going to be days we're going to miss, and we will make those days up at the end of the school year. Certainly, I know my other colleagues, other school districts are doing the same thing so that we can put this tragedy behind us. So that is my recommendation.
Questions? Comments? Laura?
Thank you, Jean. Especially after hearing the absenteeism information, I have mixed feelings about this, but certainly understand the far-reaching impacts of this tragedy and the trauma to our staff. So thank you for bringing it forward. And I think we have, is it 5 days that we usually have allocated, like for snow?
Yeah, we'll tack on a day for whatever. Usually,
Right.
Typically in a school year you get 3 or 4, but depending on it, looks like it's not going to be a very great winter for us here. But
Yeah.
So there could be more.
So it seems like tacking on 2 along with, we could be going into like the last week of June or yeah. Okay. Thank you.
All right. All right. So now we will vote. So the motion is on the table and seconded. All those in favor? None opposed. Thank you. All right, so this was one of the adjustments to the agenda, item number 14. Do I have a motion for consideration and approval to employ a physical education teacher at the Durham Community School for the 2023-2024 school year, 1 year only? Danielle and Malik, thank you.
Okay, I present to you Patrick Engelwright. Patrick has a BS in physical education, health education from Bemidji State University in Minnesota, a master's in educational administration from Grand Canyon University in Arizona. He's certified as a PE teacher for grades K to 12. Relevant experience, he's been a 7th and 8th grade physical education and health teacher at Cheyenne Mountain Junior High School in Colorado, a K-2 PE teacher at Atwood Elementary in Oakland, Maine, and a 6th to 8th grade PE teacher in Messalonsky Middle School in Oakland. References describe Patrick as committed, having an incredible impact as a teacher, helping students build characters. He has a big personality, is great with colleagues, holds himself to a high standard, and has great energy.
All All right. Any questions? Cool.
This is the position that we were hearing about that is replacing the guidance. So after the 1 year, we will go back and find the guidance.
I think Mr. Pidden will give his thoughts during his budget presentation when we get there. But what his thoughts are.
Okay, but this position is for 1 year only.
All right. Any other questions? All right. All those in favor? None opposed. Great. Thank you. We are up to 15 public comment, and I know we do have a member of the public here, so we'll just ask you to come up to the mic. We won't make you fill out the form since you're the only one here. You want him to? Oh, apparently she wants you to fill out the form.
I'll fill it out.
Sorry.
No problem. I don't mind. My name is Nathan Ledger, and I live in Durham. And for public comment, I only had two things, which is ironically, you guys talked about it with the absences in school. One of the questions that I didn't hear that I'm hoping to hear is there a drop in performance in these students? I think that's the most important. Like they could miss a week for a vacation, but do we know where they fall in terms of their education? And is that high enough where they're not actually being impacted? I think that's huge to not just say whether they're in school or not. How is it having an impact on their whatever, which led me into the next thing is if we're going to count the amount of days that the students are out, I have to educate myself and that's fine. On professional learning days, I counted 8 of them in the school year, which is, a lot. I just counted on the calendar. I could be wrong by all means. But I counted 8 either professional learning days or professional days where there's no students in the school. And I just need to educate myself on that. But if we're going to hold the students to a standard, I don't know, it just kind of irks me about how they always tend to line up with the holidays. So like there's a 4-day, like tomorrow's no school, and the parents have to deal with that extra day, even though we already have a day attached to a holiday. And so now you're asking the parents to cover a lot more. And then the next thing, I hope you're watching my time, because I didn't prepare this. The next thing is security. It's near and dear to my heart. I don't know what can be done about it. I know that the RSU5 budget pays for a school resource officer that resides in this building. His office is in this building and he's employed by this town. So it's very limited on what he can do. I understand that, but we have to be thinking about the other school systems in Durham and Pownell. And if we have to reach out to Androscoggin County to see what their staffing is like or whatever, but I just find it as a Durham resident paying taxes to pay for or substantially, or whatever word I'm looking for, if we're supplementing the cost of a school resource officer that is only being utilized by the town of Freeport, I don't want to say unfair, but I think something should be done where all the schools in the district need to be protected. And I'm a big law enforcement person. I think that's what's going to help. But I know that that's a huge debate throughout the country and we don't need to get in that tonight. So those are the only things I had for public comment. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. With that, I would take a motion to adjourn. Mara and Kelly, thank you. All those in favor? Great. None opposed. Just so you know, this is a short one. Don't get used to them. But welcome.